there's been definitely some conversation about workforce talent and the issues that all of us are facing. Now, apparently, it's on the endangered species list.
Yeah.
To talk more about that is Christina Kitchen from ECMWF.
Oh, thank you, Brian, and thank you to everyone who's managed to stay for the final sort of sessions today, and for those online, really hope you can understand and hear us all okay still in the UK. So this is my sort of David Attenborough approach and sort of plea for action. And for those of you who know me, I'm Christine Kitchen. They've probably heard me banging on about this story for quite a few years now, but it's always a nice opportunity to be able to just explain some of the requirements for digital research professionals, and basically building on a number of things that have, as Brian mentioned, have been discussed in a number of talks, starting from Kath Rose, who was talking about some of the training programs, Mark when he was talking about the Excalibur program, and building on sort of the well-known types and opportunities of where the RSEs are strengthened and what else we should be doing, and building on things that have come in the UKRI white paper strategy. And just as a quite little aside on that one, it was interesting that the white paper strategy was sort of 2019 to 2030 draft, and yet we're probably in about a midpoint review. So does it argue that we should actually be taking some time now to how accurate is that strategy, and an opportunity to refresh it? But that's an aside. We heard from the Alan Turing Institute and about the skills and the tools and how things are so fast paced, and I think these are all challenges that if we don't take time to stop, reflect and see what we need to be doing as a community, and not be looking in our niche silos but on a wider pool, then we do run the risk of some of these services becoming sort of really difficult. And we've already heard people are struggling to attract talented individuals, and you know, what are we going to be doing? We see the same old faces. All that's happening is we're poaching each other's staff, we're poaching each other's skills, and how do we sort of look at what's next for the community? And so just as a quick overview, and again, probably preaching to the converted, a lot of people already know this, but we've heard that, you know, basically research computing services, be that HPC, be it cloud, be it AI, it's no longer a single monolithic system. We are putting more and more services, features, functionality onto these systems, yet still using the same small teams to be able to support and run these. But the challenges are we're no longer just doing it on single processor types. We've already heard about the different GPUs, we've got different processors, you've got ARM, you've got different accelerators, you've got the interconnects, you've got the range of different storage pools, we've got integration into the cloud. It's all new challenges. On top of file systems, we're now looking at containerization, all the different ways we can build. It's introducing more and more complexities that we're having to rapidly work on. But also the diversity of the communities that we're supporting. It's no longer the people experienced in HPC tools and understanding the codes, understanding what we mean when we say we want to profile and benchmark. We've got a number of users that literally are using our services the same way as they use their laptops for Word, email. You know, it's a tool. They want to get the results. They're not interested in the foundations of it. And therefore, there's it's expanded from this specialist niche community to becoming pervasive. And there's a lot of prerequisites and understanding that we need to be able to do to keep this as a general service. And how do we get the toolkits to support and enable the research? And as I've mentioned, this is really a good opportunity on a scale through the HPC AI Advisory Council to, you know, basically say this is a global challenge. It's not UK specific, it's not academic specific, it's not vendor specific. It really is a global issue that we're facing. And I think it's fair to say there isn't going to be one single silver bullet to fix this. We've heard that there are pockets of training, there are skills, there are people putting courses on at university, but how do we broaden awareness? We're sort of preaching to the converted, but how do we reach these other communities? What do we do? And trying to basically say, I haven't got the answers, but I want to try and raise the questions. And it's a shame this session's happening at the end, because it would be really nice to open this as a forum discussion, but this might be something that we can take forward with people being interested. But really, what is next? We can't keep talking about it. We really need to be thinking how we now rectify this. So technology, we've heard about how it's all growing, all the different features and functionalities that is coming in. And it is now pervasive. It is recognised that it is really the third pillar underpinning the research opportunities across just about every single domain. It's no longer just computational science and engineering, you know, it's into the medical societies, it's into arts, humanities, social sciences. They might not understand how it's used, but it really has got big exploitation across a vast domains. But there's also a risk that we're starting to lose some of the identity because we use so many different terms. What do people actually mean by this? HPC used to be quite well defined. It's now become quite sort of nebulous term and everyone uses it interchangeably. But it also means, you know, when you're trying to get functionality or you're trying to get investments, you know, the funding councils don't even really understand sometimes what we're asking for. Our senior managers, the universities, the corporate identities, they've all got their own perception and it's maybe no longer got a clear sort of direction and travel. From a system administration viewpoint, and sorry, a bit of a sort of a self-indulgent bit, having come from this originally as a chemist and an end user and then ending up doing a sysadmin, although I'm no longer a hands-on sysadmin sadly, I realised the complexity when you're trying to troubleshoot a system when it's not working. 5-10 years ago it was difficult. Now we're looking at all these different components. How do you know if it's the processor, the memory, the file system, the interconnect? When you're running it over multiple different systems and it's just one loose cable, trying to identify where a fault is difficult, and there's not even a single dashboard or coherent interface. You've got tools for monitoring one thing, you've got a different set environments for monitoring this, and you know there's grey areas where things aren't being properly monitored. So how do you know about predictive failures and faults, and when that impacts on a large running job that's using a big system? It's a real challenge, and the suppliers who are developing these systems, they can test at scale, but when you're looking at these big petaflop plus machines, they don't have the environments to test and be able to troubleshoot all the different scenarios that your research community will throw at it. And believe me, you can do a lot of benchmarking and acceptance tests, think you've done everything. As soon as you let those researchers onto the systems, they'll find new and innovative ways to run a job that you've never thought about, and before you know it, you've got a new sort of I/O challenge or something that you're trying to understand why anyone would run something that way. So you've got all these challenges. And we do have people are specialist experts. A lot of people running the bigger facilities, they've grown with these systems, so they've understand the basics, the foundations. Then you look at introducing new features and functionality. They have evolved as it's grown, and they become quite specialist. Often the tools that we've got off the shelf aren't what they need, so they customise them. Suddenly you've got all your different sort of ad hoc developments that no longer mean you can get global upgrades without it. And how do we ensure that, you know, we don't keep getting bespoke solutions, but it becomes a community? And you know, you've heard all the different things about Kubernetes, authentication, security, applications, OSs. These are all just part of the story, and a lot of the time we focus a lot on the end applications and we just use a generic term, middleware, and hope that everyone understands what we mean to cover a multitude of sins. And again, I think it's a little bit disingenuous to those who are actually there developing those bits that it doesn't get the necessary same recognition, because it's not the glamorous marketing PR that you get from the end code showing the scale up, the performance, the research that it's enabled, and it really should be driven by the research opportunities. And it's then looking at the balance of how we do all this. So I think for those who are already involved, it's something we've grown with. If you're trying to attract the next generation, this should be something we're looking at how we market and promote, but also cognizant that it's really daunting. You're coming into what is quite a closed shop almost, and suddenly looking at this big picture, you wouldn't know where to start. And it's breaking it down into those bite-sized chunks that make it sort of achievable and attractive. And this is where we sort of go on to my déjà vu point. Back in 2019, when a lot of the tier 2 calls went out, and I appreciate this was not the optimal call, but in true sort of computer science fashion, we came up with E2SAS, which I think was the environment for the enhancement of system administration skills or something as a proposal. And I should have read my bullet point because it's actually done there, so I didn't have to do it from memory. And this was basically recognising that there was all this stuff about better software, better research. And this is where we sort of came up with the tagline that you also needed better systems, because if you're investing all this effort in tuning and porting your codes, but your underlying system isn't properly being maintained, you're not getting the best value for your buck. And also understanding that we've talked to lots of suppliers, and you know, you meet up at like supercomputing, you hear all on a global scale, everyone's having the same thing. And it's also the massive of billions that have been invested just in the UK in technology startups. We need the people to be able to build, monitor, maintain and grow these skills, but we can't do it in isolation. So this was a challenge and a proposal to sort of at least get it out on the table. And I think what we're trying to say is, everyone is struggling. It's recognised. I think it's acknowledged. Here I am in 2022, almost 2023, still saying the same thing, still seeing the same nods, still seeing everyone sort of agreeing. But we've still not done anything really about it. We have a few initiatives, but it's not joined up, it's not coordinated. I know we can't do everything at once, and it's not something that we can just say we'll do in isolation, but maybe if we start on a UK perspective and we get more people, but we need to take a step back and see how we can address this, I think. We also use terms. We come up with different objectives. So if you say, what is a digital professional? I don't really know. We've got all these different terminologies like system administrator, an analysis, a system engineer, research scientist, an architect, a design solution, a cloud engineer. When we're going out to recruit or advertise, I think we're all time constrained. So we put an advert out based on a historic thing and we come up with a list of skills. We have such a big wish list for what we want. It's almost impossible to achieve, and I think that probably detracts people, but it also means, are we actually putting the right criteria and skills in there? We still ask for a degree. Why do you need a degree to run a supercomputer? Should we be looking a little bit more flexible? You know, if we're looking at a wider marketplace and we're not just focusing on trying to attract academics who may be interested in the research, wanting to come and run onto the systems, you've got the Army, you've got the Air Force, you've got all these people who do different technologies, apprenticeship schemes, you've got people who are coming out from schools. There are all these different routes, but we are so sort of tunnel visioned. Maybe we are becoming a bit myopic. But we put these out, you see them all coming out onto things like the UK HPC SIG mailing list, and we're all advertising and poaching staff from one centre to another centre. That centre then goes out and advertises, nicks it from a different site, and it goes round, but we're not expanding. We're not getting any more new fresh blood really coming in. It was refreshing to see there are a few more sort of increased sort of gender diversity in the room, but we're not getting the ethnic change or anything else, so we're still missing, I think, a number of tricks. And let's be honest, how many people use LinkedIn to go and identify who we can go and recruit? All the recruitment agencies use LinkedIn as a tool. And on that note, I should just congratulate Mark. It's your 16th anniversary at Leicester University, I understand, from LinkedIn. So it can be quite good for sort of promotion opportunities. We didn't give you a sort of a happy anniversary song, at least. Be grateful there's no karaoke sessions going on. But how do we sort of get around this? What do we need to do? And I know historically, again, there's been efforts to try and come up with standardisation of what do we mean by these different roles, different titles. What is ResOps? What is DevOps? What is MLOps? Because there's these new languages coming out. Is it a system engineer? Is it a system analyst? Is it a system technician? All these other different things. Matt reminded me yesterday, there's a technician commitment where a number of UK academic sites signed up to this pledge where there would be recognition of a technician in their own right, and for promotion opportunities you'd no longer need to be managing a team of experts or have, you know, these code developments or this research publication rates. There would be ways that you could acknowledge the technical excellence so they could get promotions and opportunities. I found out Cardiff University, where I used to work, had signed up to the Technicians Pledge when it was first started, one of the founder members. Yet I still had to fight to get sort of people within teams promoted. And we also run these systems with a few exceptions. Obviously, I know some of the larger sort of sites do have diversity in the teams, but if you look at a number of universities, we are running these systems with subcritical teams, really. We've got one, maybe two if you're luxury, sysadmins that know the systems. If they disappear, there is no knowledge exchange, there is no way that someone in a university IT could just pick it up and run it in the interim. So we are running these with very, very small teams and yet expecting them to become experts in lots of different fields. And it's, how do we start matrixing this out? How do we get it better? And the other issue you say when you start raising this is, well, if only we had the time. We're always reacting to an issue. There's a new challenge, there's a new proposal, we're doing this, that and the other. We've got the time issue from the management view where we're looking at the strategies and how to evolve it. But it cascades all the way through all your staff members. If you look at your sysadmins, if you could give them a day a week where they could take time, where they could be looking at what the environment's doing, looking at how to improve the cluster monitoring, all that. I bet there's all sorts of interesting, innovative things, but no, they've got to answer the user queries, they're keeping the systems updated, something's gone wrong, there's a system failed, or we've got to do this, that and the other. They are always got so much on their workload, we are not providing them with the time to maybe develop. We keep saying, we want to get someone in at an expert level because we need this job, we need it doing now. And we acknowledge, yes, but we should be looking at the succession planning, we should be doing apprenticeship schemes, we should be doing mentoring. Again, some of the UK institutes have got the luxury of doing that. I know Birmingham do it, I know Edinburgh do it. But for many institutions, we just do not have the bandwidth. So we are not fostering the innovation of skills that's maybe necessary in all of this. So it's again taking that time to step back and say, how can we be getting the time to be improving it from an academic perspective to get the new people coming through? And what can we do to increase this? Because again, as I say, we still always advertise in traditional academic environments. Should we be looking at how we widen the demographics to how we're attracting these, and what is the way for doing this? And this is a little bit controversial, but often I think it's almost heralded as one-trick ponies. And what I mean by this is, a few years back now, EPSRC established the Research Software Engineers. And this has been really successful. They've got a career pathway, it's been defined, there's been investments in establishing these teams where they can look at the end application, the algorithms for exploiting the services. The risk is, though, it's almost been a victim of its own success, because senior managers in institutions say, well, why do you need all this? You've got the RSEs, they're held up as the answer to absolutely everything. But they're not the people who do the fundamental system administration. They're not the people that do the DevOps. It's a real team that we need, but because we've got so much strong investment there, everyone says that. Other initiatives where I've worked in, we've been able to recruit a team of RSEs together with a technical team. The RSEs talk about the science and the research that's done on there because that gets the publicity and glamour. We don't give the system administrators a chance to say what they've been doing around the challenges of keeping the system availability, because, well, that's just a metric. Yeah, we expect 24/7 availability, everything else is 24/7 this day and age. Oh, but you're only paid 9 to 5. Oh, there's a nice financial sector coming out, we'll pay you nice money, and you've lost your sysadmin. You know, so people don't want to promote or sort of give them the opportunities for some of this, because there's a real risk that you'll lose your staff. But how are we going to get better at advertising the roles that they do? So we've filled some of the pieces, but we've got loads of different parts of the jigsaw puzzle that's missing. And my analogy there is for sort of the non-technical managers when you're trying to get investment cases. It's like saying a marathon runner and a sprinter are the same thing, because they both do running. But you wouldn't put a sprinter in for the London Marathon, and likewise you wouldn't expect, you know, a London Marathon to win you the 100-metre sprint relay. But to them, it's, you run, so why can't you do it? You know, you run a system, so why can't you tune the applications? There are so many sort of subtle nuances that I think somehow we need to understand and be promoting. So this is the bit that I don't have the answers, but been trying to say, what are we actually trying to achieve? And I think there's almost a bit where before we can come up with a strategy for investment, a bit like the RSEs, to take a step back and say, what are the key things? What are the bits that we're not hitting? Why aren't we hitting them? What are other sectors doing that might be something that we can take up on? And that could be completely outside of research computing. It could be how other systems where they've had successive have been able to develop their strategies and plans and the formulaic approaches that we could be doing. So there's an analysis piece. There's the demographics. We're really good at getting people in academia to come in and do sysadmin, because that's where most of our system administrators, I suspect, have come from. You maybe occasionally get some web engineers, someone with a bit of Linux web experience coming in from a few routes. If you're really lucky, your university IT or your computer science department might have some promising people that you've managed to poach and attract in. But we're still focusing on that. How do we get into some of the other minority sectors? How do we grow and get from targeting sort of known knowns to getting into these unknown avenues that we don't exploit? Some of it could be marketing, some of it could be publicity, but I think we just need someone to be almost tasked with forming this sort of strategy group where we can ask the questions, what are the key things we need to be doing? Once you've got the questions, you can start saying, well, what are the quick wins? How are we going to develop a strategy? What's the investment that we need? And it might start on a regional level, but it's not just got to be academics, it's got to be the industry, it's got to be the suppliers, it's a real sort of across the landscape. We should be looking at what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Asia. Paul was saying earlier about, in South Africa, they've got the real keen, the enthusiasm. How do we tap into those enthusiastic individuals? Where do we start bringing them in from? Because they'll be the ones that come in with the fresh ideas, the fresh perspectives, will challenge us in terms of, we've always done it this way. Why have we always done it this way? Oh, well, it's always sat that way. Sometimes it just needs someone to ask those questions to get some of the more experienced people thinking, hang on, there might be better ways of doing this. And it changes from this sort of productive bit into a proactive, and I think there's all these things. But if we don't get something soon, we are going to be getting onto my turning into David Attenborough. And if we don't start looking at the population, we are getting older, we're fetching that pool, it's getting smaller. We are geographically constrained, tick, small population and declining. Oh dear, are we yet at a very small population? But these are all the things that define going towards critically extinct, and we are sort of heading down that. We can all see this car crash happening, we've all been talking about it, but nobody's hitting the brakes yet and saying, what next? And as I said, it's easy for me to stand up here and shoot the bullets after especially jumping ship from academia and taking the money, but these are all real questions that somehow we do need to as a community. And what I'd really like is sort of lively debate and feedback as to how people think this should be going. So that's basically throwing it open to the community. I mean, I'm happy to answer from my perspective. I know there has been pockets of work done. How do we start pooling these pockets of where things are, not replicating but complementing and pulling it together into a coherent package where we can start saying, this is how we do it. And it could be, in collaboration with other apprenticeships, secondment, placements, but it all is time, money and investment, all things that are equally in short supply. But if we don't do something soon, it's great for a lot of us, we'll be retired, it'll be somebody else's problem, but that's a major problem that is hitting the sector across the board. And I think we do have the RSEs, we do have the research, we are looking at the sustainability and energy. We can't forget those other bit and people that are essential that maybe don't get the promotion and marketing that they really do deserve. So happy to take questions. I can't see if anyone's online still or if I bored them.
Any questions or commentary?
Yeah, I've got one. I think I mentioned I do a student cluster competition in the U.S. And one of our students got recruited from a small university, a historically black school, to Lawrence Livermore at a salary of $140,000
Nice.
every year, not just that first year. And I was kind of shocked by that in a great way, but the students don't necessarily know those opportunities are out there. I found 34,000 jobs on one of the things that mentioned HPC.
It's really nice, but the other question there is, those salaries are really nice, and in the UK, that's maybe where your big business and finance can go. academics, we don't have those salaries, so we have to be demonstrating the sort of the impact and the sort of the what else they're achieving. But there is the whole package there, and that should be a success story. We should be celebrating those when they do get to those bits, but we also therefore need to be having the people that we can afford to retain, because if we keep offering the salaries, University X has to offer more, University Y then, and it keeps going until we become unsustainable because we're just too expensive.
So I guess I've got kind of So historically I didn't come from kind of a specific science background.
Exactly.
I came from sports. And in sports we have obviously a topic called talent identification, where we actually identify talent coming through the systems from an early standpoint. And I don't really see that happen.
We don't.
I don't see talent identification coming through. But in enterprise environments, you see talent identification at all levels. So you have Facebook running bounty programs, or Google running bounty programs. And I don't see that kind of...
Good idea, sort of things we should be doing.
Cluster competition sponsored by AWS.
But those kind of bounty programs are what get people recognized.
It gets people recognised. Things like the Student Cluster Challenge, I know Computing Insight do it and they run it on a UK basis.
I think I asked a question about the Cluster Challenge and just about why isn't that open access?
And that should be, but I think also the trouble there is we're targeting the known still. You're getting the universities that are proactive, promoting it to the students, and it's the time for those people to go and canvass within the universities. And if you notice, a lot of the smaller universities just do not have the sort of time to do that, and therefore you're going into the people who are already quite au fait or interested in the technology. It's widening it outside of where academia is. It's still a good...
Have your national labs, your DRACs.
Yeah.
Have them host the students and train the students. The mentors love it. It's maybe a week. It works out real well and it gets students interested.
I should let the people in DRAC comment on that.
And ironically, I think so we always talk about the brain drain back out to industry, right? We always talk about that. But actually, I know so many guys who work in systems administration at enterprise IT that would absolutely kill to work on the fastest systems in the world, right?
Yeah, I gotta say.
Some of those guys that work in those enterprise environments, they're not too far away from what those environments are offering, right?
So how do we?
But what we need to do is open up those opportunities to identify that talent by giving them access to those systems and giving them the opportunity to learn it really quickly, like a week-long program. But open that out to industry, not just universities, because again, we're fishing in the same pool. You know, if we always go to universities, we're always looking at university-based environments.
But then we're sort of conflicting what we were saying earlier about these costs so much, we need to be reducing, we only need to be focusing on that, and it's the innovation against
I guess it's kind of like that
balance.
longer-term view of actually, if we don't start identifying that talent outside of that and bringing it in.
Yeah.
And is it not also,
I see there's two more,
is it not also an issue that if we're succeed in poaching people back from industry, that industry, it still doesn't make it feel bigger.
I think when I say industry, I don't mean HPC industry, I mean standard enterprise IT industry.
Yeah, more outside.
And
Sorry.
standard enterprise IT industry, I know guys that operate systems that are like 10, 15 years old. Absolutely hate it.
Yeah, we could be getting them from Virgin Media and BT.
I mean, I came from BT, 10 years in BT, working on old Oracle systems. Hate every second of it, but
you could go to Admiral Insurance or any of the different sectors, yeah, but again, it's the salary attraction. But sorry, I'm mindful, Jörg, you've been patient.
Yeah, no, just to emphasize, this is not a UK problem. I got my training, so to speak, how to set up a cluster back at the Technical University of Graz in Austria. And I'm still having, you know, my contacts there, and every time I'm going over, I speak to them. I said, what do you do to address this problem, assuming you have a problem? And he said, you see, when you were around, we were looking for talents and basically took them under our wings and trained them up because we knew it will be successful. And working now for Imperial, and being a chemist like Christine, by training, I think there is at least some kind of success. The next generation, they trained up because there was a hope they somehow will establish. Meanwhile, they are hoping they're actually turning up for the job. And I was talking to a friend of mine who is a professor in organic chemistry in Berlin, and he is a year younger than I am, and he's retiring. And I asked him, why are you doing that? And he said, I'm simply fed up. The quality of students I'm getting is just, they know half of what we have learned. So there are a number of issues around here. And just to finish off, coming back to the UK, a friend of mine, she is, what is it called, at a university, a local departmental IT specialist, grade 8. Her son is earning more money, also in IT, because her son decided to go to industry, one of the tech companies. So there are a number of issues around here.
You've been patient.
Mine was just around the gender gap. I did a computer science degree 20 years ago. I started working for Dirac a year and a half ago. In between, I worked in lots of other industries, including politics on a day like today, which is very interesting. My only comment is I'm really, really tired of traveling to conferences and having to go to breakfast meetings when there are other things I need to do. So can we host events for underrepresented genders and people in general outside of breakfast hours? And for those people that are early in childcare and they have childcare dropping off kids to school, I think it's one of those considerations in the organisation committees that might not always be represented, so I'm happy to kind of help amplify that. And yeah, and I'll leave it there.
No, I think that's a brilliant point, because the number of times either things are first thing or people put meetings in at 3:30, 4 o'clock when people have to disappear. Yeah. And it's sort of almost like an afterthought on how it's scheduled, because I suspect a lot of the makers do not think outside of that because they haven't had those degrees of responsibilities or commitment. There's somebody else who's always been able to take those bits on, so a useful point. Mark.
So just going back to Dan's comment about hosting people. So one of the things we do in Dirac is hosting, so they're undergraduate students, it's still university, but it's undergraduate students to do 6 months as a software engineer with one of the Dirac teams working on things. Now, that's good, but there's a limit to how many we can host.
Exactly.
And it is when the teams that you're bringing people into it, it's the same with apprenticeships. If the team is already stretched and small, mentoring a whole load of people who may or may not turn out to be exactly as good as you hoped can actually be an extra strain. Now, I think on average it does tend to work, but we're almost slightly below critical mass in quite a lot of places. I don't just mean Dirac, in quite a lot of universities where if you were a bit bigger, you could start hosting people and you could hire someone who's not really ready to, needs a year of training. But at the moment, we just have to hire someone who can walk in tomorrow and start because, we're already understaffed. And that's...
Well, we can take this offline if you want to learn from our...
Absolutely.
We were doing it at 50 first time.
That would be really useful.
Yeah.
No,
I'd be very happy.
That would be really useful, I think, to share on a wider basis as well. Simon.
So that is the way it was done in the past. We wouldn't employ people to drop into the job. And I think it's a failing of the IT method, is that you have to hire somebody who has the exact skills for a particular job. Firstly, an HPC job here, and that's one of the attractions. So I think we really have to try and get back to having, everybody knows we need more staff. This is a good reason for it, because you have to train people on the job. You take people in who have a number of skills or the enthusiasm, and you need to be able to train them, mentor them, and have a career path for them so that they can get a bigger salary.
It's the career path that is going to be critical on that.
And in general, the salaries that people end up at aren't high enough for the skills they're doing compared to their other colleagues in IT. So, but I would say the internships, things like that, that's the way I've seen people getting interested in the field. That's the most successful thing I've seen over the past few years, so I would support that.
Yeah. I have to apologise to the question that's come online, because I think a lot of the questions that has been asked here has been answered in the discussion, but I'm not sure whether everyone's been able to hear that. But if not, hopefully maybe after the conference we'll be able to type up more answers to resolve some of these. But I do think there is an awful lot that we need to do and it's just finding the way to do it, because I think as I think the nail on the head is, it's time, money and commitments. And if you don't have the career pathways and the well-defined opportunities, how are we going to attract that? And then how do we diversify? Because I think outside of this community we are seen as very niche and very elitist, and it's probably an intimidating environment to try and get into if you don't understand what it is, and therefore there's a marketing and promotion opportunity that we also need to be conducting, because we basically market to the known usual suspects.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important point that maybe we're been trying to fight against that, and like everybody experiencing difficulties. But one thing we've been doing is to have the RSC being part of the research team, not somebody aside. So they were no different with other postdocs. They were sharing the same office. They have similar salaries, etc. And so I try to attract people by telling them you're going to be a researcher in these fields with a stronger emphasis in software development. And I think that somewhat worked. I mean, the missing element, that's why I'm seeing it is the career path, like you say, is like the prime, and a lot of them, especially the good one. I was saying to Mark, when I say, do you want the RSC position, they say, well, what's going on after? And generally, if I don't have a answer, they say, well, no, I'm going to do something else then. I mean, they still prefer trying to do the standard postdoc cycle, trying to get a lectureship, something like that. So I think what's very important is to, at least for me, especially for domain-specific software engineering, is to integrate the RSC as some kind of special flavor of postdoc in a kind of traditional academic cycle. Maybe it doesn't work for more operational stuff, which are more related to the data center, but for the scientific application, it works.
I think for the scientific and the research domain, that's great, but it's when your tools are being used for production, enterprise-style research, where, you know, there's the stability, there's the reliability, you've got all those pressures, and you're trying to do both activities. But there is this concept where we do need this pool of expertise where they are available and can work on specific projects as and when. And there's a real risk, because we are sort of funded on, you know, 1 year, 3 year or something, that the continuity as well is challenging, because by a lot of institution, staff, although valued, can often be perceived as collateral damage. Well, you know, your contract's coming to the end, you can get a job elsewhere, you know, you're funded only for this amount of time. You can't build a sustainable service if you can't guarantee the longevity of some of your staff. Now, sometimes it's good that you go and check.
You know, for HPC, scientific HPC, one thing I also don't really like is a pool of expert type of model. Some of the code, I think, about even my own software are fairly barbaric, and you know, and they don't come with a manual, so it takes 1 year for a person to actually get familiar with it. And then if they get parachuted to another project, this is not. You
lose a lot of valuable knowledge.
So again, if they're integrated in the research directly, I think that really helps.
But so I think that point goes back to what you were saying earlier. We need to make a list of the things we're trying to solve, because the type of RSC you're talking about is domain specific. The solution for that might be always embedding in a group, rather than having teams of domain specific. But that doesn't work in every situation. And so from the funding, like from UKRI perspective, it needs to be recognised that there isn't one that just putting a load of funding into a central pool of RSEs won't solve every problem, won't be the most efficient way of doing it. So, but yeah, I think we need to actively write down all the things we need to be done, and then work out.
I think it's that step back, isn't it, in a fresh perspective, but it needs somebody being brought out, I think, almost, or a sort of consortium being brought together to work on it and dedicated, because if we do it under best endeavours, everyone's day job takes over.
I think that was a very important